Welcome to the Georgia Highlands College Math 97 and Math 99 tutorial videos. In this video segment, we'll be answering the question, how do you factor a polynomial by grouping? Well, the first step in this process is to group terms with common factors. Now, you might need to do a little bit of rearranging to be able to have that situation. Secondly, you'll factor out the GCF out of each group. Third, you'll factor out the remaining GCBF, which is greatest common binomial factor. And then finally, you'll end up checking it with multiplication. Let's take a look at an example. We'll start by looking at the example x cubed plus 5x squared plus 2x plus 10. Now notice there are 4 terms here, and this is a new situation with the factoring problems that we've been given. So anytime you see a problem that starts out with 4 terms, you should immediately try factoring using this method of grouping. So the first step is to group terms with common factors. And you can see in our first 2 terms that they both have a factor of x squared. So I'll simply group those terms together using parentheses. And if I look at the second 2 terms, I can group those together because they each have a factor of 2 in them. So the first step is to simply group terms together that have common factors. Moving on to the next step, we factor out the common factor out of each group. So beginning with x cubed plus 5x squared, we see that they both have a common factor of x squared. When I divide that common factor out of each of the terms, I'm left with x plus 5. Moving to the second group, they each have a common factor of positive 2. And when I divide that common factor out of both terms, I'm left with x plus 5. Now this may look really familiar to you from the factoring a greatest common binomial factor out, because you have created a situation where we now have a common binomial factor. So just like we did in that last process of factoring out the greatest common binomial factor, we bring the x plus 5 out front, and when we divide x plus 5 out of both of those terms, we're left with x squared plus 2. This is the factored form of the polynomial x cubed plus 5x squared plus 2x plus 10. But as usual, we need to check just to make sure. And we check by multiplying our factored form back out to see if we end up with the polynomial that we originally began with. So through distribution, I'll multiply the x by both of the terms in the second polynomial, and then I'll come back and multiply the 5 by both of the terms in the second polynomial. X times x squared gives us x cubed. X times 2 is positive 2x. Moving on to distributing the 5, 5 plus x squared is positive 5x squared, and 5 times 2 is positive 10. Rewriting this polynomial in standard form, I would have x cubed plus 5x squared plus 2x plus 10. And you can see we ended up with the same polynomial that we began with. Therefore, x plus 5 times x squared plus 2 is the factored form of x cubed plus 5x squared plus 2x plus 10. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial video. If you have any other questions about the method of factoring by grouping, please contact your Highlands instructor.